An Apache bride he couldn't resist. Lonely rancher, awoke to a forbidden gift. Daniel had lived on the ranch for nearly 20 years, and in all that time he had grown used to the solitude. The wide plains stretched endlessly in every direction, and the sky at sunset was painted in colors so deep that they seemed almost unreal. Beauty. Yet, despite the beauty, the isolation pressed down on him every night. He had once had a family, a loving wife and a small, bright-eyed daughter. Since then, the ranch had been both his home and his only companion. Each morning, Daniel rose before dawn, the chill of the early air brushing against his skin as he stepped outside. The ground was still damp with dew, and the scent of earth and grass filled his lungs. He walked to the barn, checked on the cattle, and made sure that everything was in order for the day ahead. It was routine, and though it was demanding, it gave him purpose. Still, as he worked, there was a hollow part of him that yearned for more than this endless cycle of chores and solitude. The days were long, and Daniel often found himself talking to the animals more than he did to people. He knew the names of each of his cattle, the personalities of his horses, and even the way the dogs responded to his voice. Sometimes he would speak aloud while mending fences or repairing tools, and, though no one answered him, he found comfort in the sound of his own voice. It was a small solace, but it reminded him that he still existed in a world beyond himself. One late afternoon, as Daniel was finishing his work near the edge of the property, he noticed something unusual. Dust rose in the distance, and the rhythmic sound of hooves striking the dry earth reached his ears. He squinted against the sunlight and saw a small group of travelers making their way across the plain. They were mounted on horses, moving in a line that was both orderly and purposeful. Among them was a woman, tall and poised, with dark hair that caught the sun. Her presence stood out even from a distance, and Daniel felt an unexpected pull of curiosity. He had seen travelers pass through before, but there was something different about this group. They moved with quiet confidence, and the woman, Awoke, as he would later learn, had a calm intensity that seemed to command attention without even trying. Daniel watched as they approached a small ridge near his property, then slowed to rest. He hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should leave the safety of his ranch and approach them. After all, outsiders were not always welcomed in these parts, and old prejudices ran deep. Yet, something about the way Awoke carried herself stirred a sense of intrigue and, more surprisingly, hope. That night, Daniel sat by the fire in his modest cabin, the flickering flames casting shadows on the wooden walls. He poured himself a cup of strong coffee and stared into the dancing light, thinking about the travelers. His mind replayed their movements, their quiet gestures, and especially the way Awoke had seemed aware of his presence without even looking directly at him. He realized he hadn't felt this kind of curiosity in years. A part of him feared that this longing, this sudden desire to know someone beyond his own routine, was dangerous, and yet he could not push it away. The next morning brought a wind that carried the scent of dry grass and distant rain. Daniel set out early, as usual, and when he reached the fence near the ridge, he noticed that the travelers were still there. Awoke was speaking to an older man, presumably her father or elder, but she glanced toward him occasionally, her dark eyes meeting his. Daniel felt a strange mixture of nervousness and courage. He reminded himself that he was merely observing, but he also knew that he wanted to do more, to speak, to offer some small gesture of help or hospitality. After a moment of hesitation, he walked toward them, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. "Morning," he called out in a steady voice. The travelers turned, and Awoke's eyes met his again. There was a brief, unreadable expression on her face, but she nodded politely. Daniel felt a rush of both relief and nervousness. "I hope I'm not intruding," he continued. "I just wanted to see if you need water for your horses. The creek is nearby." Awoke's lips curved into a small, polite smile. She nodded. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice calm and measured. There was a warmth in her tone that contrasted with the cautious distance she maintained, and Daniel felt a strange sense of connection forming in that simple exchange. He led them to the creek, watching as Awoke dismounted with grace and tended to her horse. She moved with ease, her hands steady and sure, but there was a gentleness in the way she spoke to the animals that reminded Daniel of his own daughter, long gone. He realized that in her presence the emptiness he had carried for so many years began to ease, even if only slightly. For the next few hours, Daniel helped the travelers with small tasks, repairing a broken wheel on a wagon, sharing some of the food he had stored, and offering advice about the safest paths through the plains. All the while, Awoke observed him, occasionally speaking to him directly. Her questions were simple, yet thoughtful, and Daniel found himself answering more openly than he had with anyone in years. By evening, the travelers prepared to continue their journey. Daniel walked with them to the edge of his property, feeling a reluctant sense of loss. "I hope your journey is safe," he said, trying to hide the sadness in his voice. Awoke looked at him directly, her eyes steady and clear. "Thank you," she replied. "You have a kind heart. It is rare in these parts." Daniel felt a warmth spread through him at her words, and he realized that this brief encounter had awakened something he hadn't expected, a hope that perhaps life could still bring connection, even in the midst of loneliness. As he watched them ride away, disappearing into the horizon, Daniel returned to his cabin with a strange mixture of satisfaction and longing. The plains were still vast and empty, the wind still whispering across the grass, but now there was a spark, a sense that something new, something unexpected, had entered his life. That night, Daniel sat by the fire once more, sipping his coffee, and thought about Awoke. He remembered the way she had looked at him, the quiet confidence she carried, and the small smile she had given him. But for the first time in years, he felt a flicker of anticipation for what tomorrow might bring. And deep down, he knew that this encounter was only the beginning. The plains were wide, and life was unpredictable. But for the first time in a long time, Daniel felt that perhaps he was not entirely alone. The next morning, Daniel woke to the soft glow of sunlight filtering through his cabin window. The events of the previous day replayed in his mind, making his chest feel both lighter and heavier at the same time. He had met Awoke, and though it was a brief encounter, it had stirred feelings he had not felt in years. For the first time in a long time, the ranch, the plains, and even the silence seemed alive with possibility. He set about his morning chores with a renewed energy. Feeding the cattle, brushing the horses, and mending fences all felt different now, as though each task was part of a larger rhythm in which he was no longer entirely alone. Big glancing toward the horizon, half expecting to see Awoke and her family appear again. Part of him worried that he was imagining it, that he was clinging to a fleeting moment, but another part knew it was real. He could not ignore the spark that had been lit. Later that morning, Daniel rode toward the ridge where he had first seen the travelers. The wind was cool on his face, carrying the scent of wild grass and distant pines. He scanned the horizon carefully, hoping to catch sight of them, and to his surprise he saw dust rising again in the distance. The travelers were approaching slowly, their horses steady and sure. His heart beat faster, a mixture of excitement and nervousness coursing through him. When they arrived near his property, Daniel noticed that Awoke had dismounted before the others and was tending to her horse. She moved with the same grace and quiet confidence as before. He called out a greeting, and this time she responded with a small smile, not as distant as the day before. It was a smile that seemed to welcome him, though cautiously. "Good morning," Daniel said, keeping his voice calm. "It seems you've returned. I hope the night treated you well." "It was quiet," she replied. "The plains are kind to travelers who respect them." Her voice carried a warmth, but there was still caution in her tone. Daniel appreciated it. He understood that trust could not be rushed, especially between strangers from different worlds. Over the next few hours, Daniel helped the travelers with small tasks around the edge of the ranch. A wagon wheel needed repairing, a small herd of goats had wandered near the fence, and the horses required water and feed. Awoke worked alongside him at times, and though they spoke little, their silent cooperation was comfortable. Daniel found himself watching the way she moved, the care she showed for the animals, and the quiet strength in her eyes. As the day wore on, Daniel finally gathered the courage to ask more about her life. "You travel a lot?" he said cautiously. "Do you come through here often?" Awoke looked toward the horizon, her gaze distant. "We move where the land allows us. My family has always traveled this way. It is how we live and survive." There was a quiet pride in her voice, an acceptance of a life shaped by circumstance rather than choice. Daniel listened intently, realizing that despite their differences, they shared something fundamental. Both had known loneliness. Both had learned resilience. For a moment, Daniel wondered if it was wrong to feel drawn to her. He had lived most of his life isolated from the world, and she came from a background so different from his own. But the thought of not knowing her, of letting this connection fade, felt heavier than any risk. He decided that careful kindness, genuine attention, and small gestures of trust were the right path forward. In the afternoon, Daniel prepared a small meal for them near the creek. He had brought bread, dried meat, and fresh water. It was simple, but it represented his willingness to offer hospitality, to bridge the gap between their worlds. Awoke accepted the food with grace, and for the first time they spoke more freely. She asked questions about the ranch, about the work he did, and about life on the plains. Daniel answered honestly. sometimes laughing softly at his own past mistakes, sometimes speaking with quiet reflection about the years he had spent alone. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting golden light across the plains, a gentle silence fell over them. Daniel noticed how the shadows played across Ahioka's face, how her eyes reflected the colors of the evening sky. He realized he was not just observing her. He was noticing her in a way he had never noticed anyone before. He felt a mixture of respect, admiration, and something deeper that he could not yet name. Awoke, too, seemed aware of their growing connection. Though she remained cautious, she allowed small gestures that conveyed trust, sharing a laugh over a minor accident with the goats, allowing Daniel to assist her with her horse, and speaking honestly about the challenges of her life. Each gesture built a bridge between them, fragile but strong enough to hold. As evening approached, the elder of Ahioka's group called her back to help with setting up their temporary camp. Daniel watched as she obeyed, yet she turned to give him a final look. A small nod of acknowledgement, a silent promise that their paths would cross again. Daniel felt a pang of longing as they prepared to move onward. He had come to cherish even these brief moments, and the thought of their separation made the plains feel suddenly emptier. That night, Daniel sat alone by the fire in his cabin, staring at the glowing embers. He thought about the day, about the quiet moments shared, and about the subtle ways in which Awoke had begun to open a part of herself to him. He knew that this connection, delicate and tentative, was something rare. It required patience, respect, and courage. He also knew that pursuing it could bring challenges, but the idea of turning away felt impossible. Sleep came reluctantly. His mind was filled with memories of Ayoka's voice, the way her hands moved with care, and the quiet intelligence reflected in her eyes. He realized that he was no longer just lonely. He was awake to the possibility of companionship, of trust, of understanding. The isolation that had defined his life now seemed less certain, as if the vast plains themselves had shifted to make room for something new. The following morning, Daniel awoke with determination. He prepared a small gift, a piece of carved wood he had shaped himself, simple but meaningful. It was a token of friendship, a gesture of goodwill, and a symbol of his respect. Though he did not know if Awoke would accept it, he felt that offering it was the right step forward. It was a way to show that connection could exist despite differences, that trust could be built carefully, and that loneliness could be eased by simple acts of kindness. By mid-morning, the travelers had returned to the edge of his property. Daniel approached with the gift, heart pounding, unsure how it would be received. Awoke met him at the creek, her eyes steady but curious. He offered the carved wood, explaining quietly that it was a small token of respect and friendship. Awoke accepted it with a gentle nod, her fingers brushing his as she took it. The gesture was simple, but it carried weight, a silent acknowledgement that their worlds could intersect without fear or judgment. Daniel felt a warmth in his chest, a mix of relief and quiet joy. It was a small victory, but one that mattered deeply. The day passed with shared tasks, quiet conversation, and moments of laughter. Daniel began to see the depth of Awoke's character, the strength, intelligence, and kindness that defined her. He also recognized that she, too, was opening a part of herself to him, letting him see beyond the surface of her guarded exterior. For both of them, these moments were a delicate dance, balancing trust, curiosity, and respect. As the sun set and the travelers prepared to leave once more, Daniel felt a mixture of longing and anticipation. He knew that the plains were vast and that life was unpredictable, but he also knew that this connection, fragile yet real, was something worth nurturing. He watched them ride away, the dust rising behind them, and felt a quiet hope stirring within him. That night, as he sat by the fire, Daniel reflected on the events of the day. He realized that trust and connection could emerge even in the most unlikely circumstances. The plains were still wide and quiet, but they no longer felt empty. Somewhere out there, Awoke moved with the same sense of cautious curiosity, and for the first time in many years, Daniel felt that he was not entirely alone. Days passed since the brief but meaningful encounters with Awoke and her family, yet Daniel could not stop thinking about them. The carved wood gift he had offered remained on his workbench, a small reminder of the fragile trust they had begun to build. Each time he glanced at it, he felt a mixture of hope and anxiety, hope that their paths would cross again, and anxiety about whether he could navigate this connection without overstepping boundaries. The ranch continued its daily rhythm, yet Daniel noticed subtle changes in himself. He worked with more focus, speaking softly to his horses and cattle as if their shared presence gave him courage. When he repaired fences or mended tools, his thoughts wandered back to Awoke. The calm confidence in her movements, the intelligence in her eyes, and the quiet laughter she had shared when helping him with the goats. The memory of her smile brought a warmth he hadn't felt in years, a reminder that human connection could still exist, even after long stretches of isolation. One afternoon, as Daniel walked along the fence line, he spotted dust rising in the distance once again.
Is heart quickened? Could it be them?
Sure enough, the group of travelers was approaching, moving steadily across the plains. This time, Daniel noticed how they navigated the rough terrain with ease, a harmony between rider and horse that only came from years of experience. Awoke rode at the front, her posture upright and confident, her gaze sweeping across the land, as if she could read every detail. Daniel approached them cautiously. "Welcome back," he called. "I hope the journey here was not too difficult." Awoke's eyes met his, and she nodded politely. "The land is challenging, but we manage. It is what we know." Her tone was calm, yet Daniel sensed a hint of curiosity in her words, as though she wanted to gauge how he had fared in her absence. The group settled near the creek again, and Daniel offered to help with water and food. Over the past encounters, they had developed an unspoken rhythm. While the others tended to their horses in camp, Daniel and Awoke worked together quietly. He admired her skill and the patience she showed when handling the animals. There was a grace in her movements, a careful precision that spoke of years of experience and deep respect for life around her. As they worked, Daniel decided to take a risk. "Awoke," he said softly, "I hope I am not being forward, but I was wondering, would you like to walk with me for a while, just along the ridge? The view is beautiful this time of day." She paused, glancing at him with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Yes," she said. "It is peaceful there." They walked together along the ridge, the sun casting long shadows over the plains. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the gentle sounds of nature, the wind rustling through the grass, birds calling in the distance, and the soft crunch of their footsteps on the dirt. Daniel noticed how Awoke seemed completely at ease in this environment, her eyes taking in the land as if she were reading a story written in every hill and valley. After a while, Daniel spoke, his voice low and reflective. "Day, you must travel a lot, seeing so many places. Is it lonely sometimes?" Awoke considered the question carefully. "Loneliness is part of life for all who live in the wide land, but it is not always a burden. Sometimes it allows us to understand ourselves better, to appreciate small moments of connection when they come." Her words struck Daniel deeply. He realized that she too understood the weight of solitude, and that their shared experiences of quiet and isolation created a subtle bond between them. Encouraged, Daniel continued, "I have lived here for many years, mostly alone. I thought I was used to it, but meeting you has reminded me that there is still more to life than work and routine." He hesitated, unsure if he should continue. "I don't know if that is bold to say, but it is true." Ayoka's gaze softened. She did not speak immediately, but the way she walked beside him, relaxed yet attentive, showed that she appreciated his honesty. Finally, she said, "It is brave to speak truth. Many fear honesty because it can make the heart vulnerable. You are brave, Daniel." A quiet smile spread across his face. For the first time in years, he felt that his feelings, his desire to connect, were not misplaced or shameful. They were shared by someone else who understood the value of trust and openness. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in oranges and purples, they found a large flat rock near the edge of the ridge and sat down. The land stretched endlessly before them, silent yet alive. Daniel felt a sense of peace he had not known in years. Here, with Awoke beside him, the world felt less vast and lonely. "I have a gift," Daniel said softly, reaching into his satchel. He pulled out the carved piece of wood he had shaped, the token of respect and friendship. "I made this for you before, but I wanted to offer it again now that we have spoken more. It is small, but it carries meaning." Awoke took the piece in her hands, examining it carefully. She traced the carved lines with her fingers, a soft smile touching her lips. "It is beautiful," she said. "It shows thoughtfulness and care. You are a kind man, Daniel." Few offer such gifts without expectation. Her words warmed him, but they also reminded him that their connection was fragile. They came from different worlds, with expectations and traditions that could complicate any deeper bond. Yet, for now, the simple act of sharing this token built a bridge, however temporary, between them. They watched the sun slowly disappear beyond the horizon, the sky deepening into twilight. The first stars began to appear, twinkling faintly over the plains. Daniel felt a quiet courage rising within him, the kind that comes from understanding that some connections are worth nurturing, even if the path is uncertain. When it was time to return, Daniel walked Ahioka back to her group. The elder spoke briefly with him, offering thanks for his help, and the travelers prepared to rest for the night. Daniel lingered, not wanting to say goodbye so soon. Ahioka looked at him once more, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You have been thoughtful and gentle. I have not forgotten it." Daniel nodded, a lump forming in his throat. "I will see you again," he said softly. "I hope the journey treats you well until then." Ahioka inclined her head, and then she turned to join her family. Daniel watched them disappear into the shadows of the evening, the dust settling back onto the plains. He felt a mix of longing and hope, longing for the moments already shared, and hope that their paths would cross once more. That night, Daniel sat by the fire in his cabin, staring into the glowing embers. He thought about the day, about the small gestures, the shared work, and the quiet conversations. Each memory strengthened his belief that trust and connection could exist even between people from very different worlds. He realized that his feelings for Ahioka were no longer just curiosity or admiration. They had grown into something deeper: respect, trust, and the beginning of friendship that could, in time, become even more. And though he knew the path ahead might be complicated, he felt ready to walk it carefully, with patience and honesty. For the first time in many years, Daniel felt that life had shifted. The plains were still vast, the work demanding, and the isolation real, but they no longer felt empty. Somewhere out there, Ahioka was moving with the same sense of courage and thoughtfulness that he admired. And somewhere in the wide distance between them, a connection was forming, delicate yet strong and full of promise. As he drifted to sleep that night, Daniel felt a quiet determination. He would honor this connection with care. He would continue to offer trust, patience, and kindness, knowing that meaningful bonds were rare and precious. The gift of friendship, and perhaps something deeper, was unfolding before him, and he was ready to embrace it step by step, with respect and courage. Days turned into weeks, and the connection between Daniel and Ahioka grew quietly but steadily. Though their meetings were brief and separated by the vastness of the plains, each encounter left a deeper impression on both of them. Daniel began to anticipate their meetings with a mix of excitement and nervousness, aware that these moments were rare and precious. One late afternoon, dust rose on the horizon, signaling the approach of the travelers. Daniel had finished his chores early, his mind restless with anticipation. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue across the fields and turning the distant hills into soft silhouettes. When he finally saw Ahioka riding at the front of her group, his heart quickened. She was as poised and graceful as ever, yet there was a subtle shift in her demeanor, a hint of curiosity and warmth that she did not try to hide. Daniel approached cautiously, waving his hand in greeting. "Good afternoon," he called, his voice steady despite the fluttering of his chest. Ahioka's eyes met his, and a small, genuine smile appeared on her lips. "Good afternoon, Daniel," she said. Her voice carried a quiet strength, but Daniel noticed a gentleness behind it. It was as if she had grown to trust him, even just slightly, and the realization filled him with hope. He led them to a shaded spot near the creek where they could rest their horses. Daniel had prepared a simple meal, arranging bread, fruit, and fresh water on a flat rock. The travelers accepted the offer with quiet gratitude, and Ahioka sat beside him, their proximity comfortable and natural. They spoke little at first, focusing on the work of caring for the animals and ensuring everyone was comfortable. Yet even in silence, a sense of connection flowed between them, like the gentle movement of water over stones. Finally, Daniel spoke, choosing his words carefully. "Ahioka, I hope I am not being forward. I wanted to ask, will you walk with me again, along the ridge? There is a place I would like to show you, a view I think you will appreciate." Ahioka considered his request, her eyes thoughtful. After a moment she nodded. "Yes," she said. "I would like that." As they walked, the wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers and earth. Daniel noticed the way Ahioka moved, steady, sure, yet relaxed. There was a quiet confidence in her stride, a balance between strength and grace that captivated him. He found himself talking more openly than ever before, sharing stories of his life on the ranch, the challenges he had faced, and the memories of his family. Ahioka listened intently, her expression calm but engaged. She asked questions that were simple yet thoughtful, drawing him into reflection and conversation. Daniel felt a rare sense of understanding between them, a recognition of shared experiences despite the differences in their backgrounds. Loneliness, he realized, was a universal language. After a while, they reached the top of the ridge. The view was breathtaking. The plains stretched endlessly before them, dotted with rolling hills, patches of wildflowers, and the occasional wandering animal. The sky above was painted in shades of orange, pink, and purple as the sun began its slow descent. Daniel felt a sense of peace he had not known in years, and he knew Awoke felt it too. They sat on a flat rock at the edge of the ridge, their shoulders almost touching. Daniel handed her a small bundle, a new gift he had prepared, simple but meaningful. It was a hand-stitched cloth, decorated with patterns inspired by the natural shapes he had observed on the ranch. "I made this for you," he said softly. "It is a small gesture of respect and appreciation for your friendship." Awoke accepted the gift with quiet grace. She examined it carefully, her fingers tracing the patterns. "It is beautiful," she said. "You, Daniel. You are thoughtful and kind." Her words warmed him, and he felt a deep sense of connection forming between them. As the sun continued to set, Daniel spoke about the importance of trust and honesty. "I know our lives are very different," he said, "but I feel a bond with you that I cannot ignore. It is rare, and I do not want to lose it." Awoke looked at him, her dark eyes reflecting the colors of the sky. "I feel it too," she admitted softly. "It is unusual, but it is real. There is something between us, a quiet understanding that cannot be forced. It grows slowly, and yet it is strong." For a long time they sat in silence, watching as the light faded and stars began to appear one by one. The plains were quiet, the air filled with the soft sounds of nature. Daniel realized that this moment, shared, peaceful, and genuine, was a turning point. He had found someone who understood him, someone who valued trust, honesty, and connection as much as he did. As night fell, they walked back to the creek where the travelers had set up camp. Daniel noticed the way Awoke moved with ease among her family, helping where needed, yet always returning his glance with a quiet acknowledgement. Their bond, though still delicate and unspoken, had strengthened. There was a mutual respect that could not be ignored, a recognition that they had found something rare in each other. Before parting for the night, Daniel spoke once more. "I hope tomorrow brings us another moment like today," he said. "Even if brief, it is something I cherish." Awoke nodded, her eyes meeting his with sincerity. "It will," she promised. "The plains are wide, but paths can meet again. We will find time to share these moments." As Daniel watched them settle by the fire, he felt a mixture of contentment and longing. The connection they had built was fragile, shaped by trust and patience, but it was real. He knew that the journey ahead would require care, respect, and courage, yet he felt ready to face it. That night, Daniel sat in his cabin, the fire crackling and casting warm light across the wooden walls. He thought about the day, about the shared conversations, the quiet walks, and the small gestures that had deepened their bond. Each memory was a reminder that meaningful connections could emerge even in the most unexpected places. He realized that he had begun to see the world differently. The ranch was no longer just a place of work and routine. It was a space where relationships could grow, where trust could be nurtured, and where life could offer unexpected moments of beauty and connection. The following morning, Daniel woke early, the first light of dawn painting the sky in soft pastel colors. He felt a sense of anticipation, a quiet excitement for the day ahead. He prepared a small meal, tending to his animals with care, yet his thoughts remained focused on Awoke. He wondered what the day would bring, how their paths would cross, and what new understanding they might share. When dust appeared on the horizon once again, signaling the approach of the travelers, Daniel felt his heart lift. Awoke rode at the front, her presence commanding yet gentle. Their eyes met, and a smile passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of the growing trust and understanding between them. They spent the day much like before, walking, talking, and sharing quiet moments of companionship. Daniel noticed how each day Awoke seemed more open, more willing to allow herself to experience connection despite the uncertainty of their lives. And he too felt himself opening, revealing parts of his heart he had kept hidden for years. As the sun began its descent, painting the plains in warm hues, Daniel and Awoke found themselves on the ridge once more. The gift he had offered the previous evening now lay forgotten, replaced by the simple joy of being together. They sat in silence, sharing the quiet beauty of the world around them, a connection deeper than words could describe. Daniel understood that the bond they were forming was rare, fragile, and precious. It was built not on grand gestures, but on small acts of trust, honesty, and mutual respect. And as the first stars appeared in the night sky, he felt a quiet certainty. No matter the challenges ahead, this connection was something worth protecting, nurturing, and cherishing. For Daniel and Awoke, the plains were no longer empty or isolating. They were a space of possibility, a place where trust could grow, where hearts could meet across boundaries, and where the quiet power of understanding could create something truly meaningful. And as they returned to the travelers' camp side by side, yet mindful of the unspoken boundaries, Daniel felt a sense of hope he had not known in years. The bond between them was real, delicate yet strong, and it was only the beginning of a story that would continue to unfold step by step, day by day, with patience, respect, and care. The days that followed felt different to Daniel. The ranch was the same as it had always been, the fields stretching endlessly under the sun, the cattle grazing peacefully, and the wind whispering through the grass. Yet Daniel's heart had changed. Every task, every quiet moment carried a sense of anticipation now. He had discovered something he thought he might never find again, a connection that was gentle, real, and meaningful. And though he remained cautious, he felt ready to embrace it fully. One morning he rose before sunrise, the cool air brushing against his face as he stepped outside. The sky was painted in soft shades of orange and pink, and the land seemed to shimmer with promise. Daniel went about his chores with careful attention, feeding the cattle, checking the fences, and brushing the horses. Yet his mind kept returning to Awoke, to the brief moments they had shared on the ridge and by the creek. Each memory carried warmth and a quiet strength, reminding him that life had more to offer than work and solitude. Later, as he repaired a broken fence near the edge of his property, he saw dust rising in the distance. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be them again? As the travelers approached, Daniel noticed Awoke riding at the front, her posture calm and assured, her eyes scanning the horizon as always. When their eyes met, she gave a small, genuine smile, and Daniel felt a sense of peace wash over him. He greeted her warmly. "Good morning, Awoke. I hope your journey has been kind." She nodded, her dark eyes thoughtful. "The plains are always changing, but we manage. Thank you for your help before." Daniel led them to the creek where he had prepared a small area for rest and water. He noticed how Awoke moved with ease, helping with the animals while keeping an eye on her family. Daniel admired her strength and grace, the quiet way she balanced care and confidence. There was something about her presence that made him feel more alive, more attuned to the world around him. After the animals were settled, Daniel and Awoke walked together along the ridge. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the plains. Daniel felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Today, he wanted to speak honestly about something he had been feeling for weeks but had not yet voiced. "Hey, Oka," he began softly. "I want to thank you for your trust, your kindness, and the moments we've shared. They have brought life to a part of me I thought was lost. I know our worlds are different and there are many challenges ahead, but I feel that what we share is real. It matters to me." Awoke listened silently, her eyes focused on the horizon. For a moment, the wind carried only the sounds of nature, the distant call of birds, the rustle of grass, the faint movement of animals in the fields. Then she turned to him, her expression calm but sincere. "I feel it too, Daniel," she said softly. "It is unusual, yes, but it is real. I have come to trust you, and I respect you. What we share is meaningful. I want to see where it can go, slowly and carefully, with honesty." Daniel felt a wave of relief and joy. The bond they had nurtured over weeks of small gestures, quiet conversations, and shared moments had finally reached a point of openness. It was no longer just friendship. It was trust, respect, and the beginning of something deeper. They walked together in silence for a while, watching the sun descend toward the horizon. The plains glowed in shades of gold and pink, and the air was filled with the soft scent of wildflowers and earth. Daniel realized that the beauty of this moment was more than the landscape. It was the connection between them, the unspoken understanding that had grown through patience and care. As evening approached, they returned to the creek. Daniel had prepared a small gift, a token of his appreciation and respect. It was a simple necklace made of braided cord and small stones, each chosen to represent qualities he admired in Awoke: strength, wisdom, and kindness. Awoke accepted it with a gentle smile, her fingers brushing his as she held it. "It is beautiful," she said. "Thank you, Daniel. It will remind me of our time together and the trust we have built." The gesture was simple, but it carried immense meaning. It symbolized the connection between them, fragile yet strong, built on honesty, respect, and care. Daniel realized that love, or something very close to it, could grow slowly and quietly, without rush or pressure, through mutual understanding and trust. Night fell, and the travelers prepared to rest. Daniel stayed a little longer, sitting by the fire as the stars began to appear one by one in the darkening sky. Ayoka joined him, her presence calm and reassuring. They spoke quietly about the future, about the challenges of traveling through the plains, and about their hopes for continued friendship and connection. Daniel felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had found someone who understood him, someone who valued honesty and trust as much as he did. The loneliness that had defined his life for so many years was no longer overwhelming. Instead, it had been replaced by a quiet joy, the knowledge that meaningful connections could exist even in the most unlikely circumstances. Over the next few days, Daniel and Ayoka spent more time together. They shared walks along the ridge, worked side by side to care for the animals, and spoke openly about their lives. Each moment strengthened their bond, and each day brought new understanding and appreciation for one another. Daniel noticed how Ayoka laughed softly at small, simple things, how she spoke thoughtfully, and how her presence made even the most mundane tasks feel significant. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant hues of red and gold, Daniel and Ayoka sat together on the ridge, watching the plains stretch endlessly before them. Daniel turned to her, feeling a mixture of courage and hope. "Ayoka," he said softly, "I know our lives are very different, and there are many challenges ahead, but I want you to know that whatever happens, I will honor this connection. I will respect your world, your family, and the trust you have given me. And I hope we can continue to build this bond, carefully and patiently." Ayoka looked at him, her eyes calm and full of understanding. "I feel the same," she replied. "We will move forward, slowly, with care. But I know this connection is important, and I want to see it grow, step by step, with honesty." Daniel felt a sense of peace settle over him. The bond they shared had reached a point of openness and trust, and it was a foundation upon which something truly meaningful could grow. The plains no longer felt vast and empty. They felt alive, filled with possibility and hope. The days that followed were filled with quiet moments of companionship. Daniel and Ayoka shared stories, laughter, and the simple joys of life on the plains. They worked together, helped each other, and continued to build the trust that had become the heart of their connection. Each day, Daniel felt more certain that he had found something rare, a bond that could endure, nurtured by patience, respect, and care. One morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, Daniel stood on the ridge, looking out at the land. He felt a sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought Ayoka into his life. He thought of the moments they had shared, the quiet walks, the gentle conversations, the small gestures of trust, and he knew that they had built something lasting. Ayoka joined him, standing beside him as they watched the plains bathed in golden light. For a long time they stood in silence, letting the beauty of the world and the strength of their bond fill the space between them. Daniel realized that love, or something very close to it, did not always need grand declarations. It grew quietly, patiently, through trust, respect, and shared understanding. As the travelers prepared to move on once more, Daniel and Ayoka said their farewells with calm certainty. Their connection was no longer fragile. It was a bond that could withstand distance and time, strengthened by patience, honesty, and care. They promised to meet again, to continue building the trust and friendship that had become the heart of their lives. As he watched her ride off, Daniel felt a sense of peace unlike anything he had experienced in years. The plains stretched endlessly before him, but they no longer felt lonely. They were filled with possibility, with hope, and with the quiet power of connection. And Daniel knew, deep in his heart, that this bond born of trust, patience, and understanding was something he would cherish for the rest of his life. That night, Daniel sat by the fire in his cabin, reflecting on the journey that had brought Ayoka into his life. He thought of the days they had spent together, the moments of laughter and quiet reflection, and the small gestures that had built a lasting connection. He realized that life on the plains, though often challenging and isolating, could offer moments of profound meaning. He smiled to himself, feeling a quiet joy. The loneliness that had once defined his days had been replaced by hope, trust, and the knowledge that meaningful connections could be found even in the most unexpected places. And as the fire crackled and the stars shone brightly in the night sky, Daniel felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had found a friend, a confidant, and perhaps, in time, something even more. The journey of connection, trust, and understanding had reached a turning point, but it was only the beginning. Daniel knew that challenges might come, that life would continue to test their bond, but he felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. With patience, honesty, and care, he and Ayoka would continue to nurture the rare and precious connection they had discovered, one that had the power to transform both their lives, quietly, gently, and beautifully.